Okay, Assalamualaikum and selamat sejahtera. So now we look at the first process involved in cellular respiration, which are glycolysis. Okay, so first of all, what is glycolysis? It is a metabolic conversion of glucose into two molecule of pyruvate. So means that when glycolysis process is occur, actually it will involve breakdown of glucose. So glucose is a 6-carbon molecule. So when there is a breakdown of glucose, so it will split into two molecule of pyruvate. So actually pyruvate is a 3-carbon molecule. And then from this process, it will produce 2 ATP. And also glycolysis will occur in cytosol. So glycolysis can occur with or without oxygen. So means that kalau dalam keadaan ada oksigen dan juga tiada oksigen, first process yang akan berlaku adalah glycolysis. Okay, so now we look at the steps in glycolysis. So actually there are 10 steps in glycolysis. So we look one by one. The first step here, step 1 is phosphorylation. Okay, so first of all, you have to know what is the meaning of phosphorylation. Phosphorylation means addition of phosphate. So what happened to glucose here? Okay, a phosphate group is transferred from ATP. So source of phosphate comes from ATP. Okay, and then so this phosphate from ATP were transferred to glucose, catalyzed by enzyme hexokinase. So what happened to glucose here? Glucose is phosphorylate to become glucose 6-phosphate. Okay, so kalau awak tengok di sini, phosphate group from ATP will be transferred to carbon 6 of glucose. So that's why glucose is phosphorylate to become glucose 6-phosphate. 6 here means phosphate is attached at carbon number 6. Okay, so this is step 1. So remember, for this step, it is catalyzed by enzyme. So the name of the enzyme is hexokinase. Okay, so now we look at step 2. So step 2 is isomerization. So remember, isomerization means glucose 6-phosphate will convert into its isomer, or glucose 6-phosphate will be rearranged. The keywords here is rearranged into its isomer, which is fructose 6-phosphate. Okay, what is the meaning of isomer? Okay, isomer maksud dia adalah, okay, the molecule has same molecular formula, but it has different structural formula. So what happened to glucose 6-phosphate when it is undergo isomerization? So it will rearrange to become its isomer, which is fructose 6-phosphate. Okay, then step 3, once again, it will undergo phosphorylation. So what is phosphorylation? A phosphate group from ATP is transferred to carbon 1 of fructose 6-phosphate. Okay, and this reaction is catalyzed by enzyme phosphofructokinase. So what happened to fructose 6-phosphate? It is phosphorylate to become fructose 1,6-bis phosphate. So you have to remember, when phosphorylation is occur, so this one is step 3. So what happened to fructose 6-phosphate? It will be phosphorylate to become fructose 1,6-bis phosphate. So where does phosphate group comes from? It comes from ATP. So this phosphate will attach at carbon number 1 of fructose 6-phosphate, and this reaction is catalyzed by enzyme phosphofructokinase. Okay, so if you look at this step, okay, so di sini kita dah ada 2 step di mana kita gunakan ATP, which comes from step 1 and also step 3. So setakat ni kita dah gunakan 2 ATP. So you have to remember. So actually this one we call as energy investment phase. Okay, so now we proceed to step 4. Okay, so step 4 is cleavage. Okay, so what is cleavage? Okay, so if you look at this step, so cleavage is what happened to fructose 1,6-bis phosphate. It will undergo cleavage. Cleavage means split. So what happened to fructose 6-phosphate? It will split into 2 different 3-carbon sugar. Okay, so what happened to this fructose 1,6-bis phosphate? It was split into 2 molecule of 3 carbon. The first molecule we call as dihydroxyacetone phosphate. Another one molecule glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. So both of these molecule are 3-carbon molecule. Okay, but to proceed the process of glycolysis, we need glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. So what happened to dihydroxyacetone phosphate? it will undergo isomerization. So means that step 5 is isomerization. So isomerase will catalyze the conversion between the two isomers. So what happened to dihydroxyacetone phosphate here? It will convert into its isomer, which is it will produce another one molecule of glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate. Okay, then this reaction will be proceed. Okay, so if you look at here, starting from step 6, awak mesti kena letakkan 2 di depan. Kenapa 2 di depan? Sebab kita dah dapat satu lagi glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate that is comes from dihydroxyacetone phosphate, which is already undergo isomerization. So bila dia berlaku isomerization, so it will convert to become another one glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate. So that's why starting from step 6 sampai habis, awak kena letakkan 2 di depan. So di sini menunjukkan bahawa kita ada 2 molecule of glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate. Okay, and then now we proceed to step 6. Step 6 is oxidation and phosphorylation. So what happened to glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate? First, it will be oxidized. Oxidized means it will lose its electron. So what will accept its electron is NAD+. So since NAD+ accept electron, so NAD+ is reduced to NADH. Okay, then you have to remember, since there are 2 molecule of glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate, so means that there are 2 NAD+ that will be reduced to become 2 NADH. So this one you have to remember, because NADH later will enter electron transport chain, okay, for the process of oxidative phosphorylation. Okay, beside oxidation, this step also will occur phosphorylation. So what happened in this step? Phosphate group will attach to the oxidized substrate. Okay, so this is the inorganic phosphate. So what happened to the glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate? It is convert to become 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate. Because of what? This phosphate will attach at carbon number 1 of glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate. So that's why glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate will convert to become 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate. Okay, so dah ada 2 phosphate di sini, and then remember it has 2 molecule of 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate. Okay, so now step 7 is substrate level phosphorylation. Okay, so bila awak nampak saja perkataan substrate level phosphorylation, so means that this step will involve production of ATP. Okay, so how ATP is formed? Phosphate group is transferred from carbon 1 of 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate to ADP, and it will form ATP. So since there are 2 molecule of 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate, so that's why there are 2 phosphate that will be transferred to 2 molecule of ADP. So it will form 2ATP. And then 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate is converted to 3-phosphoglycerate. Remember, this step is substrate level phosphorylation, so means that this is the step whereby ATP will be produced. So how many ATP will be produced is 2 ATP. Okay, next, what happened to 3-phosphoglycerate? Step 8 is isomerization. So what happened to this 3-phosphoglycerate? Okay, actually it will undergo relocation of phosphate group. Okay, so pada asalnya phosphate group is located at carbon 3. So when there is a relocation of phosphate group, so this phosphate group will be relocated from carbon 3 to carbon 2. So that's why 3-phosphoglycerate will rearrange into 2-phosphoglycerate. So the structure will become like this. Okay. And then step 9 is dehydration. So what is dehydration? Dehydration means removal of water molecule, which is water molecule will be removed from 2-phosphoglycerate and it will form phosphoenol pyruvate. So this one represent water molecule is already removed. Okay, so the last step in glycolysis, substrate level phosphorylation. So once again, substrate level phosphorylation is occur. So means that ATP will be produced here. Okay, so here 2 ATP, then it will 2 ADP, so it will produce 2 ATP here. Okay, so if you look at this step, what happened? Phosphate group is transferred from phosphoenol pyruvate to ADP and it will form 2 ATP. So what happened to phosphoenol pyruvate? It will be converted into pyruvate. So at the end of glycolysis, 2 molecule of pyruvate will be produced. Okay, then kalau awak tengok di sini, okay, daripada 10 steps yang terlibat dalam proses glycolysis, there are 2 steps, okay, which that we call as substrate level phosphorylation, which are from step 7 and also step 10. So from step 7, it will produce 2 ATP. Step 10 also it will produce 2 ATP. So the total ATP produced are 4 ATP, but you have to remember, okay, there are 2 ATP that are used in step 1 and also step 3. So you have to pay back. So this one we call as energy payoff. So since kita gunakan 2 ATP pada step 1 dan juga step 3, so kita kena tolakkan jumlah ATP yang ada. So dalam glycolysis kita hasilkan 2 ATP daripada substrate level phosphorylation, okay, pada step 7, dan juga 2 ATP daripada step 10, okay, from substrate level phosphorylation. So that's why the end product of glycolysis based on the ATP production, okay, the net ATP production produced in glycolysis is 2 ATP. Okay, and also from this glycolysis process, it will produce 2 NADH. So what happened to this 2 NADH? It will enter electron transport chain for oxidative phosphorylation, and another one, it will produce 2 pyruvate. So means that you have to remember what are the products of glycolysis. Okay, then what happened to pyruvate if there is a presence of oxygen? Presence of oxygen means that aerobic respiration. So kalau ada oxygen, what happened to pyruvate? Pyruvate will undergo pyruvate oxidation, or we call as link reaction. So this process will occur once pyruvate enter the mitochondria. Okay, so what is link reaction or pyruvate oxidation? So this is 2 molecule of pyruvate. So firstly, pyruvate is decarboxylated. So what is the meaning of decarboxylated? Pyruvate will remove carbon dioxide. So you have to remember, pyruvate is a 3-carbon molecule. So when it remove 1 carbon from the carbon dioxide, so it will form acetate. Beside decarboxylation, pyruvate also will be oxidized. So ada 2 benda berlaku di sini. Okay, so means that pyruvate is decarboxylated, which is pyruvate will remove the carbon dioxide, and also it will be oxidized to form acetate. So acetate is a molecule that has 2 carbon. Okay, so since pyruvate lost electron by the process of oxidation, so what will accept the electron is NAD+. So that's why NAD+ reduced to NADH. Then you have to remember, since from glycolysis, it will produce 2 pyruvate. So that's why 2 NAD+ will be reduced into 2 NADH. Okay, then what happened to the acetate? Acetate will combine with coenzyme A. So means that coenzyme A will attach to the acetate molecule, and it will form acetyl-CoA. So what happened to this acetyl-CoA? Acetyl-CoA then enters the Krebs cycle. Okay, so don't forget, these 2 NADH later will enter electron transport chain. Okay.